A California wildfire claims another life. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. A firefighter dies battling the Mendocino Complex fire. It's the largest wildfire in California history. No name released on the firefighter as investigators try to figure out what went wrong. A series of wildfires scorching the state is taking a devastating toll on fire crews, killing 6. It's also charring the state.
Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke said after touring the Carr Fire near Redding that California wildfires burned so hot in some places they sterilized the soil. He and Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue said prevention, acting ahead of time to manage forests, do thinning and prescribed burns, remove dead trees, needs to become a bigger priority.
Look, whether you're a proponent or an opponent, a believer, a non-believer of climate change, it doesn't relieve you of the responsibility to manage our public lands.
They say a change in spending on fires has been authorized to begin next fall, and that will allow them to spend money more appropriately to manage public lands before fires start.
Fox's Jessica Rosenthal. The opposite problem in Pennsylvania, too much water. Flash flooding causing trouble on the Lehigh River, where some 150 rafters at one time were missing. Crews called off the search by 10 p.m. when the rafting company said it was confident that everyone was safe. President Trump claims Omarosa committed a crime when she taped private White House conversations.
Legal experts are kind of torn on whether she actually broke the law. As for Manigault Newman herself, she says she's not worried about the fallout.
There's a lot of very corrupt things that are happening in the White House, and I am going to blow the whistle on a lot of this.
Are you concerned at all about any legal consequences for taping in a Situation Room? But are you
concerned?
Are you?
The president also says Omarosa signed a non-disclosure agreement. Omarosa says she never signed it.
Fox's Trace Gallagher, Fox News, fair and balanced.
At Delta Airlines, we're committed to donating 1% of our net profits to charities around the world. With $40 million donated in 2017, we look forward to continuing our support for years to come. For more information on Delta, visit delta.com.
The FBI fires the agent who criticized President Trump in his texts to his lover. And that's not, though, what the FBI ethics panel recommended.
Got a statement earlier today from Peter Strzok's attorney. He said Strzok was fired on Friday afternoon by the deputy director of the FBI, and the attorney alleged that the deputy director overruled the recommendation of the FBI's internal ethics panel that had recommended a 60-day suspension and a further demotion of Agent Strzok.
Fox's Catherine Herridge. Strzok defended his role in the Russia investigation in testimony to Congress earlier this summer, claiming that his feelings about the president had no impact on the probe. A GoFundMe page for Strzok has raised more than $120,000 in the hours since his firing. That's just $30,000 shy of the goal to cover his legal costs and loss of income. West Virginia lawmakers impeach a third Supreme Court justice in the scandal over spending and office renovations. The West Virginia House of Delegates approving an impeachment article Monday against Chief Justice Margaret Workman. The House approved separate impeachment articles earlier against Justice Robin Davis and a suspension of Justice Alan Lowry for lavish spending in their office renovations. Meantime, Justice Beth Walker has avoided impeachment, but she faces other hurdles. And in entertainment, AC/DC's classic rock standard, Highway to Hell, almost 40 years old, but still in the news as part of a world record. This won the Guinness World Record for the largest electric guitar ensemble. It happened in Sydney at the Guitar Festival there in Australia. And the festival, using videos and photos as proof, gathered at least 457 musicians with electric guitars. Guinness still has to confirm it, though. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News Radio.
At Delta Airlines, we're proud to support the causes that shape our world by giving back to the communities where we live, work, and serve. We're committed to donating 1% of our net profits to charities as we strive to truly make a difference in D.C. and throughout our global communities. For more information on Delta, visit delta.com.
Radio. It's nothing new. It's been here all along, with free entertainment, news, sports, music, and information. It's not just part of life, it's part of who we are. You know which station is going to tell you the score of the game, which one's going to give you a laugh in the morning, which one is going to give you something to sing along with. You know where to turn when the weather gets rough. When something big happens, good or bad, you know where to go because radio has been here all along. Radio is part of your community, woven into the fabric of what makes home, home. And now, radio has evolved to move with you with the Next Radio app and your FM-enabled phone. Just plug in your headphones to start experiencing radio in a whole new way while using way less battery and data than streaming apps. Check out the live guide to see and interact with live radio stations. Easily find your favorites like the one you're listening to right now. And as always, it's totally free. Download the Next Radio app today. Next Radio, live and local wherever you go.
Hardee's Happy Hour isn't your average happy hour. From 2 to 5 p.m., double sliders are only $1.25. Call it a charbroiled hour, a double beef hour, a whole lot of melty cheese hour. Call it what you want. Happy Hour at Hardee's is a good call. Offer for a limited time and only between 2 and 5 p.m. Price and participation may vary. Tax not included.
Well, it looks like Atlanta government schools are going to be dropping the Pledge of Allegiance. You should not be surprised. There are some words in there that are very troublesome to government schools. Words like republic. Who ever heard of that? Oh, and flag. Well, that can be offensive to some people. And, of course, the word God. Unless, of course, you've come to accept the leftist view that your God is really government. But there's a way. There's a way around this. We can get the pledge back into government school classrooms in Atlanta. All we have to do is maybe a little bit of a rewrite. We have to get rid of the words that offend the left and insert the words that send little chinchillas running up and down their spines. Well, of course, you can depend on me because I am, as you know, a New York Times #1 best-selling author. And I was a clue in the New York Times crossword puzzle, Sunday edition. So here you go. I pledge allegiance to the banner of the Teachers' Unions of America and for the mob rule for which they stand. One nation under political correctness for which they stand, with open borders, free tuition, and free health care, with equality of condition and social justice for all. Now, if we just get that rewrite done, the pledge will be back in every government school classroom in this nation. And once again, as you ponder this Pledge of Allegiance thing, I have to ask you, why are you willingly and eagerly taking the most precious thing in your life and turning it over to the government for an education? Just what has government ever done well? Solomon Brothers Studios in Naples, it's Neal Boortz.
Hardee's Happy Hour isn't your average happy hour. From 2 to 5 p.m., double sliders are only $1.25. Call it a charbroiled hour, a double beef hour, a whole lot of melty cheese hour. Call it what you want. Happy Hour at Hardee's is a good call. Offer for a limited time and only between 2 and 5 p.m. Price and participation may vary. Tax not included.
They were outnumbered, out-equipped. They had no chance of winning, but they had one huge advantage: General George Washington.
The fate of unborn millions will now depend, under God, on the courage and conduct of this army. We have to resolve to conquer or die.
Just as the leadership of one man helped form a nation, today leadership can transform the world. Leadership is in you. Now pass it on from passiton.com.
The Tom Woods Show, episode 1214.
Prepare to set fire to the index card of allowable opinion. Your daily dose of liberty education starts here. The Tom Woods Show.
Men, if you want a smooth, close, comfortable shave, check out Harry's Razors, the official razor of The Tom Woods Show. Harry's has created a trial offer for you to check them out. Go grab yours at harrys.com/woods. Hi, everybody. Tom Woods here, talking to Mark Thornton, the guy who predicted the housing bust. He was talking about the housing bubble for years. Did some really, really great work on that topic. And he has a brand new book out featuring a foreword by your host here called The Skyscraper Curse and How Austrian Economists Predicted Every Major Economic Crisis of the Last Century. You're going to hate me after this episode, if you don't hate me already, for recommending so many books to you. I know a lot of you folks out there are getting frustrated because that pile is growing and growing, and I'm not doing a thing to help you because I'm making it grow all the more all the time. But it's a great book. That's why I wrote the foreword to it. Mark Thornton is a senior fellow of the Mises Institute. He also teaches economics at Auburn University. Mark, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks, Tom. It's great to be back on your show.
There are many topics to cover in your book. I love a book like this. You learn a ton by reading The Skyscraper Curse. We'll get to skyscrapers in just a second. I think in order to understand the skyscraper thesis, we need to step back one step to talk about Austrian business cycle theory and then see how this question of skyscrapers, which when the correlation was first pointed out in 1999 between skyscraper records and the verge of economic downturns, it seemed like an interesting curiosity, and that was that. And you actually showed there is an economic explanation as to why these things ought to be connected. Let's make that connection after explaining how the Austrians explain where the boom-bust cycle comes from.
That's right, Tom. When Andrew Lawrence released his report about skyscrapers, I could see Austrian business cycle theory embedded or as an explanatory phenomenon for this curse. And Austrian business cycle theory looks at relative prices in the economy. It looks at the behavior of interest rates in the economy as the most important price in our entire economy is the interest rate. And in modern times, for at least the last century here in the United States, the Federal Reserve has been in control of interest rates, and it can raise them as much as it wants, and it can lower them as much as it wants. And unfortunately, this is what causes the modern business cycle in modern economics. When the Fed, the central bank, lowers interest rates artificially for extended period of time, it encourages entrepreneurs to do the wrong thing. It encourages much more investment in much more longer-term projects that are what I call advanced technologies. In other words, they're being created and built before their time is ready. And because of this mistake during the low interest rate period, what happens is that eventually resources are too scarce, interest rates start to rise, money becomes short, and a lot of these mail investments that took place, these bad investments that took place during the boom, are later revealed to be busts in the economy, and people go bankrupt, people lose their jobs, and the economy is set back in the aggregate.
Now, there are a few features of the skyscraper question that can fit in nicely with the story you just told, and as to why it's not, as we say, just an interesting curiosity that we see records for the tallest skyscrapers being set just as the economy is set to come back down again. So try to fit those two stories together for us.
That's right, Tom. There are features in skyscrapers that change during the boom period when interest rates are low that you can actually see. Whereas much of the phenomenon of the Austrian business cycle is very difficult to determine what's really an advanced technology, what's really a bad investment. But in skyscrapers, everything becomes much clearer. And they're what I call, or what other people have called, Cantillon effects in these record-setting skyscrapers. And the first one is that low interest rates, and this is all very well known in real estate circles, low interest rates cause land prices to rise. And so many of your audience have probably seen more signs for land for sale these last couple of years. And when land prices go up, well, that encourages builders and entrepreneurs to build taller buildings because you have to stretch out the cost of the land over more square feet in the building. And so low interest rates cause higher land prices, and higher land prices cause builders and entrepreneurs to build higher. The second phenomenon is that low interest rates, they cause new technology to be brought about in the building of skyscrapers. And so in order to build taller buildings, you need new technologies like better elevators, faster elevators. You need smaller air conditioning systems. You need, it involves everything in the building, plumbing, and so on. And so all building systems have to be reinvented to accommodate these new record-setting skyscrapers. And as a consequence, all the suppliers have to go out and come up with new products, new technologies. And so everybody is in this business of bringing about advanced technologies. And so it's very clear in the building of these record-setting skyscrapers how interest rates manipulate the economy in ways which are completely unsustainable.
All right, before we go on, can you just give us a few examples of skyscrapers and the dates so that we can see the pattern?
Sure. In the first crisis of the 20th century, which was the Panic of 1907, the Singer Building in New York and the Metropolitan Life Building in New York set records just as the panic began. Then, of course, there's the infamous Great Depression, in which the Wall Street Building set a new record in 1929. The Chrysler Building set a new record in 1930. And then, of course, the Empire State Building set a record in 1931. And so these skyscraper curses tend to come in clusters, not surprisingly. And then, of course, in the stagflation of the 1970s, just as that was getting underway, we saw the World Trade Tower 1 and World Trade Tower 2 set records. And then right after that, the Sears Building in Chicago set a record right before the stagflation. That was an awful period. That's when I was growing up. High rates of inflation and unemployment. And then, of course, double-digit interest rates and unemployment rates in the early 1980s. And then most recently, the Burj Khalifa Tower in Dubai set the record in 2007. And so I was calling for a major crisis in the economy in 2007 as a result of that. And, of course, just general knowledge about Austrian business cycle theory with stock markets at all-time highs. And everybody pretty much laughed me off on that one. But, of course, it came to pass that not only was Dubai in the Middle East an economic basket case, but, of course, the crisis spread around the world to the United States and Europe and beyond. And so, I've been looking at the history of the skyscraper curse, and I've gone back into the 19th century and found more examples of record-setting skyscrapers. And, of course, we're living in a period where skyscrapers are going up all around the world. And so it's a very interesting connection that we're living through right now, not just in history.
Let's talk about predictions, because you were just saying that you used some of this and some other information to at least say that there was a very, very strong possibility of a major downturn around 2007. And then you had also been writing about the housing bubble for several years by that point. So I definitely want to get back to that. But one of the things that Austrians sometimes boast about is that they were out in front predicting certain downturns, but particularly not just any old downturns, but downturns that followed years of assurances by the mainstream that maybe booms don't have to be followed by busts anymore. There was a confidence in the 20s that by managing the consumer price level, they had maybe somehow figured out some secret sauce to get prosperity without the bust. And then likewise in the 1960s going into 1970, there were predictions like by Arthur Okun that maybe we've gone past the business cycle at this point in our history. And then Alan Greenspan, the 1990s, even said maybe booms don't have to be followed by busts after all, and then you get the dot-com bust. So it's interesting that those, not just any old garden variety recession, but those times in particular where everybody, or there's a mania that maybe the economists have solved the problem of the boom-bust cycle, the Austrians are out in front. But how do you, and I want to talk about specific examples of that, but how do you answer the claim that, of course, the Austrians are going to be out in front because they're always saying that the economy is going to turn down? Sure, once in a while they're going to be right, but 90% of the time they're wrong.
Well, that's a good point, Tom. What Austrians do is they look at what the Federal Reserve has been doing and then say that the conditions are correct that a crisis could occur in the economy. So I started warning people about what might happen back in, I think it was 2013 or 14, because even back then the conditions were fairly ripe that a crisis could occur and unemployment could increase. And those conditions have only gotten much worse. Austrians don't know when the crisis is going to occur, and we generally don't have anything in Austrian theory that tells us how big the bust is actually going to be. So there are limitations on Austrian theory and its application to real-world analysis. But when you look at the mainstream, they're completely blinded by this, and they're completely boastful about what they have so-called accomplished in the economy, when that just really isn't so. So if you go back into the 1920s, you had Irving Fisher, the most prominent of all American economists, being interviewed on a weekly basis in places like the New York Times, and him boasting that his philosophy or theory was being used by the Federal Reserve to smooth out the business cycle, and that the prosperity that they were experiencing in the 1920s was completely real, and that you don't have anything to worry about, that we're in a permanent plateau of prosperity. And he was saying this not only right before the crash, but even long after the crash. He thought it was just a mistake based on psychology in the market that would soon correct itself. Whereas you had Ludwig von Mises writing in 1924 and 1928 in a book-like treatment, criticizing Fisher's approach as unworkable, and that it would soon result in very large imbalances in the economy. Mises was clearly right. He explained exactly why Fisher's approach was wrong. And even Fisher in 1932 admitted that there were imperfections in things like price levels and price indexes, and that they weren't able to accurately measure it. So when you look at the big picture, the Austrians are clearly right. They have limitations, but the mainstream approach of the Fishnerians, the Keynesians, the Friedmans are all wrong. And as a matter of fact, I think the most recent boast by Milton Friedman in late 2006 on the Charlie Rose show, that the Federal Reserve was doing a great job. The economy was firing on all cylinders, and he applauded the Federal Reserve and what they were doing and the approach that they were taking of, manipulating the money supply and interest rates. So on the eve of the housing debacle, Friedman was praising the Federal Reserve and the monetarist approach that he and Ben Bernanke were taking to control the economy. So, the Austrians have limitations, but I think on balance, if you're fair, at least we're on the right side of the ball. And the mainstream, consisting of Irving Fisher, Milton Friedman, and the Keynesians, have been absolutely and completely wrong.
I learned from you about Arthur Okun, who had been chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors in the late 60s, and his book, The Political Economy of Prosperity, that came out, I think, in 1970. And in that book, he more or less said, well, through wise economic stewardship and through the application of modern economic understanding, we've been able to steer our way through the business cycle, and we've conquered it. And 1 month later, 1 month after that book came out, the recession was officially declared to have begun. So there was a kind of funny poetic justice to that after that kind of boast. So can you say something about that in particular, going into the late 60s and the early 70s? Now, that's at a time when Mises was quite old at that point. His work was somewhat winding down. And Hayek, I suppose, wrote some economics, but he had moved on to social philosophy and other topics. Were there Austrians at that time warning? I suppose Murray Rothbard, right?
Absolutely. And that's a new feature of this book, is looking at what the Austrians did in the late 1960s. During the 1960s, the Keynesians completely took over. They started a bubble in the economy with artificially low interest rates. And so we had a tremendous boom in the 1960s. The stock market was up, new technology, all sorts of things were happening. And Arthur Okun, the chairman of the President's Council of Economic Advisors, he was boasting that, the Keynesians were unafraid to use these new techniques, and that we could write off the business cycle. It would no longer be a topic to be studied in the future. And he belittled the old school economist who thought that what you needed was a market approach to money and interest rates, and that you should balance the budget and government should be small. He belittled the Austrians without naming them, of course. And just as he published his book, proclaiming all of this glory for the Keynesian approach, the economy went into a recession that lasted basically 12 years of pain in the economy, tremendous losses in the stock market, and all sorts of other bad things. When I went back and re-looked at this period, though, I didn't remember the Austrians doing anything because, of course, I was too young at the time to experience them directly. But on review, I found that Murray Rothbard was spot on. I mean, he was spot on in his writings at the time. He predicted basically everything that was going to happen. He was absolutely correct. Henry Hazlitt, I had thought he was retired, but he really retired from one publication and started writing for the Los Angeles Times. He wrote something almost 200 articles for the Los Angeles Times after he retired. And he was writing about the exact right topics of inflation, of budgets gone bananas, about the Federal Reserve, about artificially low interest rates, about the Bretton Woods system, which he correctly predicted would collapse. Murray Rothbard wrote not only a pamphlet describing boom-bust cycles from the Austrian perspective in 1969, but he wrote prolifically in other publications describing exactly what was happening and what would happen, and he was absolutely on the mark. And then, of course, Ludwig von Mises, who was very old and near his death, was out actually giving public lectures warning that what the Keynesians were doing was wrong. It was going to cause all sorts of problems. It's going to cause inflation. It's going to cause recession. It was going to be the undoing of the gold standard. Again, he was just absolutely spot on. And then even Hayek, who had disappeared from economics long ago, and he was in Austria writing about non-economic topics. He got back involved in the 1970s. He wrote several pamphlets on monetary reform, on what to do with the mess that the Keynesians had created in the 1960s. And so it was great to sort of relive some of his publications, his pamphlets, the wonderful monograph that Suda Shenoy put together, where she took bits and pieces of his earlier writings and somehow sewed them all together seamlessly and produced just a wonderful pamphlet. And then, of course, you had Ron Paul and the Gold Commission, which did great work trying to bring back the real gold standard. And then, of course, when you get to the end of the period of the 1970s, you have Lew Rockwell and Murray Rothbard putting together the Mises Institute and finally creating an institutional home for Austrian economics and libertarian political theory. And nobody thought that was going to work, by the way. Everybody was dead set against Lew Rockwell. And Lew proved him wrong. He brought the Austrian school back, and we're stronger today than probably we ever have been. And so I'm very optimistic. I got into this business of Austrian economics at exactly that period of time in the early 1980s. And it was a wasteland. There was nothing there. And I've seen the growth that Lew has brought about, and it's just enormous. And I'm just thrilled, and I'm extremely optimistic going forward.
I want to fast forward to the housing bubble, because that's an area where you also built up your reputation because you had been warning about the housing bubble for years before it was on the radar of most people, before it hit. So I want to talk about your chapter in here about what causes housing bubbles. And I'll say that at that time, I guess by the time I moved, I was at the Mises Institute from 2006 until 2010. So by the time I got there, you had already been writing about the housing bubble for a couple of years. But at that time, my oldest daughter was only 3 years old. So as she got older and as we passed through the crisis and she learned that there was something wrong. She didn't know what the economy was, but she knew that a lot of folks had lost their jobs and were having trouble paying bills and things like that. And that made her sad. And so the thing I would tell her, because we would come and visit, she'd come to my office once in a while, and you had the office right next to mine. I would point in at your office and I would say, now, if only people had listened to this guy, we could have avoided a lot of this. So she grew up with this sort of weirdly semi-divine view of Mark Thornton because of that. So anyway, where do housing bubbles come from? Can it just come from a mania? Let's start with that. Can it just be self-reinforcing that a lot of people think they can do really well in real estate and that just reinforces itself? How is that not an adequate explanation?
Well, that can happen. On an individual level, literally anything can happen because we have, free human choice. But in the aggregate, that's extremely unlikely to happen. And I don't know of any circumstances under which it has happened where everybody simultaneously gets the psychological urge to go in and buy up excess housing. Generally speaking, the market has a self-reinforcing mechanism that if everybody tries to invest more or to invest in new advanced technologies, well, the interest rate is going to go up. The necessary labor wages are going to go up. The necessary materials are going to increase in price. And so it has a self-suppressing mechanism to it. You can only get an aggregate bubble in the economy when interest rates are driven artificially low and held there for an extended period of time. And what the Federal Reserve does is essentially has a moving price ceiling on interest rates. And if interest rates tend to move above where they want them to, they just throw more and more money and credit at the market, and the market continues to absorb it all. And that's where you get the tendency for bubbles to develop. It certainly booms in the economy, and bubbles in certain markets can occur. And so other people pointed to various other things specific to the housing market, like credit default swaps, the Community Reinvestment Act, all sorts of things that are specific to housing. And I admit there certainly are many, many specific benefits that homeowners get that do not apply in other areas of the economy. So the way I explained it is the Federal Reserve causes the booms and the bubbles, but the name of the bubble can be specific to certain areas that the government is intentionally trying to funnel the money into. So housing is an adjective that are caused by all these rules and regulations and these new markets that have been supported by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. You know the story, but the Fed is what creates the bubbles. So the rules and regulations, they can tip the balance in one direction in the economy or another, but bubbles can only be created by the artificial interest rates caused by the Federal Reserve.
A lot more to talk about with Mark Thornton. Let's take a minute to thank my friends at Harry's Razors for supporting the show. These folks have top-notch razors, super sharp blades, which is the key thing that you need in a razor, and that's what gives you and me a nice close shave. They're made out of durable steel that lasts. Folks who started Harry's bought a factory that's been making some of the highest quality blades in the world for over 95 years. And Harry's offers their blades at a price much lower than the leading brand, just $2 per blade compared to $4 or more. They cut out the middleman and sell directly to you. If you don't love your shave, let Harry's know within 30 days and they'll give you a full refund. They've got a nice trial offer for you to give it a shot. Get a $13 value trial set that comes with everything you need for a close, comfortable shave. A weighted ergonomic handle, 5-blade razor with a lubricating strip and trimmer blade, a rich lathering shave gel, and a travel blade cover. Listeners of my show can redeem their trial set at harrys.com/woods. Make sure you go to harrys.com/woods to redeem your offer and let them know I sent you to help support the show. Tell me about the rational expectations critique of Austrian business cycle theory. What are they saying is wrong with it?
The rational expectation theory is basically that the marketplace as a whole is always rational. It's always based on fundamental factors in the economy, and markets never go wrong. And so basically, they are free market. They are not as bad as some other schools of economic thought. They think that things like booms and busts in the economy are caused by technological shocks. So that if a positive technological shock happens in the economy, then you'll get an expansion or a boom in the economy. And then if something negative happens in the economy regarding a technological shock, then you'll get a recession. And their classic example of a negative technological shock was the oil shortages of the 1970s that caused the economy to fade away into recession. But, even if that was true, even if it was just technological shocks that caused boom and bust, well, their approach has no predictive value because the shocks are beyond their knowledge, and they have no policy cure to either prevent or to restore the economy from a negative economic shock. And so they're better than the Keynesians, but with their the Keynesians have a psychological approach, but the rational expectations approach doesn't really get you anywhere in terms of understanding the business cycle or preparing for bad parts of the cycle or not. And actually, the Austrian business cycle theory encompasses both the psychological Keynesians and the technological shocks of the rational expectation school. And with respect to the rational expectation school, look at what happened during the housing bubble. Well, there were, people were psychologically, improved, and they had a great view. They were engaging in speculative behavior of the Keynesians' point of view. But it was really the artificially low interest rates which allowed that psychological euphoria to take place. And also, of course, there were technological shocks during the boom that the Austrian approach anticipates happening. We saw a lot of new technologies during the housing bubble take place, such as in skyscraper construction. And we also saw technological shocks in financial markets as banks and financial firms created new technologies of borrowing and lending money through mortgage-backed securities, credit default swaps. All that was new financial technology that you would expect when the Federal Reserve is feeding the economy enormous amounts of money. You have to create new loans somehow. You have to give loan money to people with poor credit. And so banks were dealing with this disbursement of massive amounts of credit to worse and worse creditors by creating these new financial products. So the Austrian approach basically encompasses the fact that, there are psychological changes and there are technological changes, but why do they all happen at once? Well, the general economic explanation is the Austrian approach to the Federal Reserve creating artificially low interest rates. They don't have an economic cause to their business cycle. They have a psychological story or they have a technological story, but they don't even have an economic story.
What you've described for us is indeed what we might call, I guess, the rational expectations school. Sometimes that term is used more loosely when we say that there's a rational expectations problem with Austrian business cycle theory, and you've got a section in the book on this. The argument being that shouldn't entrepreneurs, after a while, cotton on to what the Fed is up to? Why do they keep getting suckered into getting into these overheated economies with super low interest rates where the configuration of the economy is unsustainable and is going to come undone and they're going to be caught in the middle of it? Why don't they sit out? Why don't they say, you know what, we're not going to do massive expansion during this time. We're going to let other people fail and we're just going to sit on the sidelines. So what makes them make the error over and over again? Shouldn't they, as good entrepreneurs in a capitalist system, figure out what's happening?
That's a great question, Tom. It's absolutely and a very important question to answer because, you know, the Austrians believe in that people are rational to a certain extent as well. When it comes to business cycle theory, some people do learn. Some people do sit on the sidelines. Some people do pull back and resist the temptations of the Federal Reserve. The problem is that new people can enter the market and take advantage of those low interest rates. So you will have a few people who have learned and sit on the sideline and warn people not to enter the market. Like, for example, a non-economic one was that Jimmy Rogers would appear on CNBC and warn people of the trouble ahead and of the bad policy. Well, CNBC just took him off the air as, you know, as a negative, as somebody with a negative attitude, where all these new people were coming in saying, buy, you know, buy this stock, buy that stock. And so very often the people who do the warning get pushed out of the marketplace. I had a story, a friend of mine was in the banking business and during a previous housing bubble, and he withheld giving out too many loans and only gave out loans to people he knew with good credit. And he lost his job too, because there's always bankers who are willing to come into the marketplace to give away these loans. So it's not always the same people. You actually can learn about the Austrian theory of the business cycle, and you can protect yourself from some of the worst aspects of it, but it doesn't prevent new people from coming in and looking at some old model in the banking business and saying, you know, we should be making loans at this rate to this many customers. And so the good guys get pushed out as new people come into the marketplace and don't resist the money emanating from the Federal Reserve.
I've heard a couple of different ways of addressing it. I mean, your point that the people who warn and sit out wind up getting taken to the cleaners, because what happens, and this is an argument that was made in an article, and I can't remember if it's in the QJ or in the Review of Austrian Economics, but years ago, a couple of guys, Tony Carilli and Greg Dempster, did an article on this where they said, the problem is if all your competitors are all in during the boom, and they take advantage of the artificially low interest rates to expand, and you're just going to sit there. Yeah, there's a chance that they might get caught out in it, but there's also a chance that they might just get ahead of you, and you're just sitting there. So it leads even the otherwise sensible entrepreneurs to become, you know, more gamblers because they feel like they've got to do it to survive. Now, Bob Murphy has been less convinced by that because he feels like at the heart of Austrian business cycle theory is the idea of entrepreneurial error. Not that entrepreneurs go in with their eyes wide open, knowing that it's probably a Fed boom, but what are they going to do if all their competitors are participating? They're going to have to. That doesn't seem to be part of the spirit of the Austrian theory. The spirit is entrepreneurial error. And so here, another way of thinking about it could be that to say, well, entrepreneurs ought to figure out what interest rates ought to be. But that seems like an unreasonable thing to ask them to do. It'd be like having an economy with no prices and saying, well, look, these people are entrepreneurs. They ought to be able to assign prices in the economy. No, even entrepreneurs can't do that. That's why we have a market.
Absolutely. You know, I think in the book, I address this literature where there are several explanations of how you can look at, you know, the rational entrepreneur in this kind of environment And, the Austrian theory, the whole approach is based on the idea of clusters of entrepreneurial error. The artificially low interest rates induce these malinvestments, which are all errors in the economy. So your typical mainstream economy looks at the expansion boom as the good part of the economy and the recession as the bad part, the thing to be feared and avoided at absolutely all costs. Where the Austrian approach says, no, that's actually backwards. It's the artificially low interest rates causing malinvestments, which will be later revealed as a cluster of entrepreneurial error. That's the bad part. That's when we're making mistakes. And in the corrective recessions, that's where the economy is actually healing itself. Relative prices are moving resources to their most highly valued uses. And so that's the correction. That's the good part in the economy, where you more or less leave entrepreneurs alone and allow them to make the necessary adjustments to reallocate resources and to bring the economy back to full employment, basically.
Let's talk about 2018. Here we are in, I don't know when they would say the recovery began or what month of the expansion we're in, but we're in a very long expansion right now. Now, it's a weird expansion because there are some numbers that have been very weak through this expansion. It's very odd and it's slow and sluggish, but then there are numbers that are quite strong during the expansion. What's your assessment of where we are now and where we're going? Now, granted that, again, the Austrians don't claim to be able to time things, but what do you feel about the overall health of the economy in these years after the housing bust?
Well, my view is that a lot of the growth in the economy has been artificial since about 2010 or so. The Fed did not allow the economy to go into complete recovery. So we started out on a very weak basis. We started providing credit to people who otherwise would have had to liquidate their businesses. So this expansion has been weak because of that, because of the lack of a full recovery after the housing bubble. And since then, they've sort of stabilized the economy and set us off on this course of economic expansion. And most of your audience can probably look around in the cities that they live in and see a lot of new investments in their local economy. We have numerous extremely large buildings being built in the city of Auburn, where I live and where the Institute is located. And I've seen this phenomenon elsewhere around the economy, particularly in real estate. But, there's also a lot of money that's going into other areas of the economy, such as social media, where they've been expanding and where it seems like every company in every space is doing well. And it's only the really, really old economy, like Kmart and Sears and Radio Shack, that really old economy is obviously suffering and collapsing. They don't have the customers and the resources. That's all been lured away into the newer leading edges, the advanced technologies of the modern economy. So I think that's an explanation for why it's been so weak. The reason it's been so long, I think, is because of the hyperactive monetary policy by the Federal Reserve. Remember, I said earlier in the interview that I said the economy could have gone into crisis in 2013 or 2014. But what happened instead was completely new, untried monetary policy from the Federal Reserve. We had quantitative easing 1, quantitative easing 2, we had Operation Twist. And eventually we got to the point in recent times where interest rates actually went negative in places like Japan and Germany. And so that indicates an absolutely hyperdrive monetary policy with not only just setting low interest rates, almost to zero, but the Federal Reserve and the European Bank and others, the Bank of Japan, force feeding their economy with credit and ultra low, near zero interest rates. And so the length of this expansion, I think, is because of that, because they've been just a completely untried, unforeseen, unbelievable type of monetary policy that has pushed asset prices to all-time record highs, just in an incredible fashion. The fact that government bonds in places like Italy and Spain, the pig countries of Europe, are so very, very low is ludicrous based on fundamental factors. But these outrageous monetary policies allowed that to continue. And so we're on life support. And, they're feeding us, the economy, morphine and oxygen and, all sorts of stimulants to keep it going. So I don't think it can last much longer. Basically, the economic fundamentals just, to me, say that it just can't go on much longer without a naturally induced corrective process happening.
Well, the book is The Skyscraper Curse and How Austrian Economists Predicted Every Major Economic Crisis of the Last Century. You can get it in several formats. You can get it in paperback, you can get it as an audiobook, and you can get it for free as a download, as a ebook style. And I'm going to link to all those things at tomwoods.com/1214. If you're too impatient to go even to that page, I can give you a shortcut. Mises.org/curse gets you to the free download of the book, and Mises.org/curse audio gets you to the audiobook version. But I'll link to all that at tomwoods.com/1214. Well, congratulations on the book, Mark. I'm glad a lot of this stuff that you've been writing over the years is now sitting here in one volume for people to learn from. If they didn't get it the first time in real time, then in retrospect they could get it, and maybe they'll get it next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Tom. And those links are, for the free versions, are temporary. So I urge the audience to get out there and get yours today.
Oh, okay. Well, that is good to know. All right. Well, the early bird gets the worm on this one. All right. Thanks, Mark. All right, folks, before I let you go, especially for you homeschoolers, brand new site you might want to check out. I cannot believe this domain name was available. Thishomeschool.com. Perfect. That is so great. I don't know how they thought of that. So simple, you would think it had to be taken. And apparently it wasn't. Well, Lindsay Schweitzer is an educational technology consultant and former math teacher who homeschools her 3 young children. And at thishomeschool.com, she blogs about educational activities and resources to help parents support their children's growth with intellectual rigor and strong libertarian values. And when you check out thishomeschool.com, you're just going to love it. It's laid out very nicely, wonderful posts on all different topics. So all different projects that you might do, whether it's gardening or cooking or sight words or games that facilitate motor development or bonding among siblings or learning letters or an activity for learning early math and learning about bones and the human body and so on. Fantastic site, a model for how you should do this. So check it out at thishomeschool.com. I'll link to it at tomwoods.com/1214. And if you would like to get publicity when you're about to start a website, make sure you get your web hosting through my link. You'll get the best price Bluehost has, and you'll get free publicity and other great bonuses from me. Check those all out at tomwoods.com/publicity. Watch for an excellent bonus episode this weekend from a mom of 7 who has cracked the code about how to be able to work without leaving your kids at home. She said, darn it, I'm going to work from this computer regardless of what it takes, and man, is she good at it. So check that out tomorrow. See you soon.
Become a smarter libertarian in just 30 minutes a day. Visit tomwoods.com to subscribe to the show for free, and we'll see you next time.
Do you need dental insurance? Then call Physicians Mutual Insurance Company for details. Not just a discount plan, real coverage for 350 procedures. Call 1-855-402-7556. Again, that's 1-855-402-7556. Offer is not available in Minnesota, Montana, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Washington.
For USA Radio News, I'm Rick Vincent. President Trump traveled to Fort Drum, New York to sign the John S. McCain National Defense Authorization Act. It gives service members a raise and provides funding for new weapons and equipment.
After years of devastating cuts, we're now rebuilding our military like we never have before.
The bill provides $717 billion to the military and advances many of Senator John McCain's policy priorities, including tough language on Russia. The president specifically highlighted a 2.6% raise for military personnel. Finally, that's how President Trump reacted to the firing of FBI agent Peter Strzok. Strzok sent critical messages about then-candidate Trump in 2016 while overseeing the opening of the Russia investigation. The FBI is now running the investigation into Friday's theft of an airplane at SeaTac. Port of Seattle Commission President Courtney Gregori said all security protocols were followed the day of the hijacking.
We had an aberration.
You're listening to USA Radio News. Officials say a Utah man crashed his small jet into his own home hours after being arrested for domestic violence. His wife and child escaped the home unharmed. 47-year-old Dwayne Youd was an experienced pilot. He and his wife had been having marital problems. In Florida, a white man has been charged with manslaughter after fatally shooting an unarmed black man during an argument over a parking spot outside a Clearwater convenience store. Michael Drake had claimed he was acting in self-defense after Marquise McLaughlin pushed him down. Attorney Michelle Rayner, who represents McLaughlin's family, says they back the state prosecutor's decision.
We are very encouraged by today's turn of events, especially in light of the sheriff's refusal to do the right thing initially.
The sheriff previously said the state's stand your ground laws prevented him from arresting Drake. Alleged Golden State killer Joseph D'Angelo has been charged with a 1975 murder in Visalia, California.
While there is no DNA in the Visalia cases, the hard work of determined investigators over the course of the last 44 years has paid off and led to this moment.
This is USA Radio News. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi is disputing the validity of a list being cited by MSNBC. USA's Chris Barnes has more.
After MSNBC comes out with a list that it says is of 51 party members running for the House who have said they won't support Nancy Pelosi for Speaker if the Democrats take control of the House this fall. Pelosi herself speaks on MSNBC's AM Joy on Sunday, and the California Democrat took issue with that list.
NBC has been on a jag of this. This is one of their priorities to undermine my prospects as Speaker.
But she added she doesn't put much stock in the list anyway.
None of us is indispensable, but I think I'm the best person for the job.
For USA Radio News, I'm Chris Barnes.
President Trump slams former senior aide Omarosa Newman over allegations in her soon-to-be-released book about her time in the White House. In a tweet Monday, Trump called Omarosa wacky and said she begged him for a White House job. Speaking to reporters, White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley accused Omarosa of turning on Trump for financial gain.
For her to go out and praise the president lavishly after she left her post and tell the truth about how much work he's done for the African American community and who he is as a person, I guess that just wasn't paying the bills.
Minnesota Democratic Congressman Keith Ellison is denying allegations of domestic abuse being made by his girlfriend. The woman says she won't share alleged video footage of the incident because it's humiliating. Ellison has denied such an incident ever occurred. For USA Radio News, I'm Rick Vincent.
Hey, Steve Harvey here for the Illinois Broadcasters Association. And in a recent survey, the Illinois Emergency Management Agency was asked to name the top 5 items that every Illinois family needs to have in their home's emergency disaster kit. Check out these answers. Water, can't live without it. Number 2, non-perishable food. Well, after all, a man gotta eat, right? Number 3, weather radio, and make sure you got fresh batteries too. Number 4, flashlight, even more reason to have fresh batteries on hand. Number 5, first aid kit. Look, there's no reason to feud over what items to put in your family's emergency disaster kit. Get the answers and more at ready.illinois.gov. That's ready.illinois.gov.
Sponsored by the Illinois Emergency Management Agency, aired in cooperation with the Illinois Broadcasters Association and this station.
This is Betty White. I know you don't need one more thing to worry about, but listen.
High blood pressure can cause kidney damage, blindness, heart attack, stroke, and you can have high blood pressure even if you feel all right. 1 in 7 adults has it, but it's easy to get your blood pressure checked, and you can treat it if it is too high. So don't worry about it, don't ignore it, just see your doctor and check it out.
For your free booklet, visit the Will Rogers Institute at wrinstitute.org and find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Shay Stevens. A longtime FBI agent who once helped lead the Russia investigation has been fired. Peter Strzok faced only temporary suspension over anti-Trump text messages he sent during the 2016 campaign. But NPR's Windsor Johnston reports that changed on Friday.
The head of the FBI office that handles disciplinary action had recommended a 60-day suspension and demotion, not termination. Strzok's attorney, Eitan Goldman, says the decision to fire him goes against typical bureau practice.
Here you have a situation where there's been constant political pressure on the bureau from the president on down for months to fire Pete, which is pretty unprecedented to have politicians weighing in on a civil servant's career path.
President Trump responded to Strzok's firing by tweeting, "Finally." He also said, quote, "The list of bad players in the FBI and DOJ gets longer and longer." Windsor Johnston, NPR News, Washington.
Airport and airline industry officials are reviewing security measures in wake of Friday's plane crash in Puget Sound, Alaska. The Northwest News Network's Tom Bonsi reports that investigators are looking into how a baggage handler managed to steal the aircraft from Seattle's main airport.
This case involved a seemingly well-liked airline worker who passed federal background checks and was authorized to be around the plane he stole. Port of Seattle Commission President Courtney Gregoire says the ongoing investigation hasn't uncovered any operational mistakes. She says the fatal airliner theft is provoking a national reckoning about the so-called insider threat at our airports.
So we're really happy that all security protocols were taken care of here. We had an aberration. So we need to think about how we improve those protocols.
During a briefing at the SeaTac terminal, Gregoire didn't say specifically what procedures could be tightened at her airport or others around the country. For NPR News, I'm Tom Bonsi.
An investigation by the Associated Press finds that many Google services keep tracking data even after the location settings on iPhones and Android devices are paused or turned off. Alan Butler is senior counsel at the Electronic Privacy Information Center in Washington. Butler says that telling users they can turn off a location setting and then storing the information anyway is deception.
It appears to be an explicitly unfair and deceptive trade practice. If a company is telling you that it's not collecting certain data about you, whether it's location data or other types of personal information, and then it is in fact collecting that data, that's classic deception.
The AP report knows that using Google search engine for information that has nothing to do with a location can pinpoint the user's precise whereabouts to within a square foot. This is NPR News. Another firefighter was killed Monday while working against the Mendocino Complex fire north of San Francisco. That brings to 6 the number of firefighters who've died in connection with massive blazes in Northern California. More than 12 major fires are burning in the state. In Montana, crews are battling more than 30 new blazes that broke out in just the past few days. 2 of those fires, including one in Glacier National Park, have prompted evacuations. The Federal Communications Commission is considering a rule change for licenses normally reserved for education and public broadcasting. As the Northwest News Network's Emily Schwing reports, some Native American leader in Washington state wants the agency to prioritize Indian reservations.
The new proposal could expand eligibility for those licenses to tribal governments. That's what Rodney Costin is hoping for. He's the chairman of the Confederated Tribes of the Colville in Washington state.
It is a safety and health aspect on our reservation, because we have so many needs and unmet needs because all of our communities are rural.
The FCC is considering a number of options. One is to auction the licenses. Costin says many tribes don't have the financial resources to outbid large telecommunication companies that might buy them. The public comment period closes in early September. For NPR News, I'm Emily Schwing in Spokane.
On Wall Street, stocks closed lower on concerns about the financial condition of Turkey's economy. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 125 points. Asian markets are mixed. I'm Shay Stevens, NPR News in Washington.
Radio. It's been here all along. You know which station is going to tell you the score of the game or where to turn when the weather gets rough. When something big happens, good or bad, you know where to go. And now radio has evolved to move with you with the Next Radio app in your FM-enabled phone. Just plug in your headphones to start experiencing radio in a whole new way while using way less battery and data than streaming apps. Find your favorite stations like the one you're listening to right now. Download the free Next Radio app today. Next Radio, live and local, wherever you go.
Hey, Steve Harvey here for the Illinois Broadcasters Association, and in a recent survey, the Illinois Emergency Management Agency was asked to name the top 5 items that every Illinois family needs to have in their home's emergency disaster kit. Check out these answers. Water, can't live without it. Number 2, non-perishable food. Well, after all, a man gotta eat, right? Number 3, weather radio, and make sure you got fresh batteries too. Number 4, flashlight. Even more reason to have fresh batteries on hand. Number 5, first aid kit. Look, there's no reason to feud over what items to put in your family's emergency disaster kit. Get the answers and more at ready.illinois.gov. That's ready.illinois.gov.
Sponsored by the Illinois Emergency Management Agency, aired in cooperation with the Illinois Broadcasters Association and this station.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is the Jason Stapleton program. It is Monday, and we're back again for another full week here, and got a lot to talk about today. We've got I am going to cover the Omarosa thing because she's got she's got the audio tapes out, and she's now claiming that that she heard Trump say the N-word, and she heard the tape, but nobody has the tape, and all this other garbage. But I'm going to play for you what she does have, which is the one that's interesting to me is is her firing by Kelly. And it's odd for a few reasons that I'll denote after we've listened to the tape. But welcome back, guys. If this is the first time you're listening to the program, welcome. What we cover here is politics and economics. I talk to you a little bit about what's going on in the world and explain to you how the world would be a lot better place if we just adhered to 5 basic principles. Individualism, limited government, individualism, peace, tolerance, and free markets. Those 5 things produce more wealth, more opportunity for more people. And if you believe in those, if you truly believe in them, then you are right and others are wrong. And I don't say that to be uppity or to act like I'm better than anybody else. I just happen to know that it's undeniable. It can't be denied. In the arena of ideas, we cannot lose. Because we have the high ground. What we know is that every time we move closer towards liberty, closer towards more individual freedom, more economic freedom, and smaller government, we see wealth and opportunity rise for everyone, not just the poorest, or not just the richest, not just the poorest, not the middle class, but everyone. And the truth is, ladies and gentlemen, you ought to be able to go as far as your ambition and skills and intelligence will take you. You don't deserve to go any farther than that, which means that if you prefer to dig ditches because your intelligence will not allow you to be a doctor or your ambition won't allow you to be a doctor, then you should be digging ditches. And you know what? The world needs ditch diggers too. But if you happen to want to strive for something better, if you have the ambition and the intelligence and the drive to do more, then no one should be standing in your way. That's what freedom is. That's what real liberty is. That's what we talk about on this show. And so I want you to understand, it's very important for me that you understand that if you believe in those principles, that you are right. And by that very notion, you make others wrong. You understand? That there is an objectivism here, that is not subjective. That we can look at the times that we have focused on more liberty and more economic freedom for more people, and we've seen what that produced, and we've also seen what statism, totalitarianism has produced, haven't we? We've seen what both sides produce. Now, the funny thing is when people talk about this, they always point towards different countries that have some sort of mixed hodgepodge socialism / capitalism, some sort of mix. And they're saying to themselves, well, if we, Jason, isn't there some kind of happy medium in there? Well, maybe there is. I don't have any idea. Here's what I do know. Take the two extremes. Take the extreme where we have the limited government of the early turn of the century, where government accounted for about 3% of GDP. Government was small, ineffective in many cases, still was involved in the wars, and if we could have cut out some of that, some of the taxation would have been even better. But we had what was essentially a very small central government, and it led to the greatest economic expansion the world had ever seen. It brought more people out of poverty, provided more opportunity to more people than any other system ever devised by man. The capitalist system is unbeaten, unmatched in its ability to raise people out of poverty, but only those who are willing to work and fight for it. Only those who have the capacity, mentally, physically, emotionally, to endure what's necessary to become wealthy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't have that in you, if that's not you, if you like coming in every single day and punching the clock and going home and fishing in the afternoon, that's your business. But you're not entitled to the wealth of anyone else. You don't get to then turn around and say, well, you know what, I haven't been as successful as the guy down the street, and therefore he ought to be paying me a little bit of what he makes. No, see, that's unacceptable. When I first got out of the Marines, there's a guy I worked with at an auto body shop. I changed oil. I had a bunch of different jobs when I got out of the Marines. One of them was changing oil at an auto body shop. And there's a guy in there, and he came in every day, did his 8 hours, never stayed late. At 5 o'clock, he was gone. Took constant trips, constant vacations. Every weekend, he was out fishing. The only thing that dude wanted to do was drink beer and fish. And all day, every day in the shop, if he got your ear, all he would talk about was fishing. I took the boat out. Yeah, I caught this great big, I don't even know, a snapper or whatever kind of, I don't fish. Too busy. He just loved it. He lived in this tiny little rundown house. He turned wrenches for a living, went fishing on the weekends. That's what he wanted to do. That was the whole of his ambition. Now, I don't hate that guy. In fact, I love him. He found his passion. His passion wasn't making money. His passion wasn't going out and making $1 million. He found what made him happy. But you see, he also didn't come after anybody else, demanding somebody else pay for his life or his lifestyle. See, he just wanted to fish. See, that's the beautiful thing about a free market system. It's a beautiful thing about libertarianism. Is that, hey, if you decide I don't want to make $1 million, I don't want to work that hard, I don't want to have to put out that kind of risk, I'd just rather go fishing, then you can do that. If you decide you want to, assemble the rest of the neighbors down the street and you all want to form a commune and you want to pool all of your resources and all of your money and live in some sort of socialist utopia amongst yourselves, I'm fine with that as well. And so would any other libertarian. As long as it's voluntary. You see, what we believe, and this is why I say you're right, what we believe allows for the most amount of opportunity, the most amount of choice for the most amount of people. There is no limit to what you can achieve under the system that we've devised. You are right, others are wrong. When you come to it from that sort of strength, when you understand that throughout history, nothing has beaten the capitalist system, and that the communist and socialist and any other ist system that you can come up with has failed, not partially, not a little bit, but epically failed. You believe we have a moral obligation to help those who are poorer than we are and to give part of what we have to help others rise and succeed and overcome hurdles. You and I are in agreement on that. But we don't have the right to compel the guy or girl down the street to give because we think it's important. Do you see what I'm saying? When we say we don't hurt people and we don't take their stuff, that's what that means. It means we don't aggress against our neighbor and we don't steal from them. and forcing them to give to a charity that they don't want to give to, or forcing them or compelling them to pay taxes to a government who then turns around and squanders the wealth of a nation, is unacceptable as well. I say this to you because in the opening monologue here, because I want you to understand what your government is doing. Now, I bring this up many, many times over the course of the last couple of years. Every time it comes up, which is virtually every quarter, I bring it to your attention, and I will do so again today. The federal government collected record individual income taxes through July. Record. Between the first of the year and July, they collected a record $1.4 trillion in individual income taxes. That's just individual, not even corporate taxes. That's just the individuals. What they pulled out of mom and pop, middle America, $1.4 trillion. But still ran a $683 billion deficit. Let that sink in for a minute. We talk about the government squandering what you have. What did you get for your 2 point something trillion dollars in spending? Are your roads that much nicer? Did you receive for the extra income that you brought in this year, the extra $100 billion or so that you paid in? Did you receive any material benefit from that? Any notice? Can you point to it? Does the government give you any accounting of exactly what they spent their money on and where it went and what it did? Is it easy for you to see the results of what they've produced? Or is it just squandered and wasted? I think you know the answer. You see, as government gets bigger, you want to talk about wealth inequality in America. You can tie the increase in wealth inequality directly to money printing by the Federal Reserve and the borrowing at the federal level. As government has expanded, it has become more and more difficult for your average American, born into lower middle class, to make his way into the wealthy. The ladder of success is having its rungs removed through regulation, through taxation, and through those in government who seek to create some sort of socialist utopia, who have yet to learn the lessons of history. It frustrates me to no end to come to you each and every day and have to show you and explain to you the error in the ways of men that if they only would crack a textbook, they would know how foolish they were being. Democratic Socialist, this is the one good thing I will tell you. This is the one good thing I will bring. Actually, we're gonna cover that in just a minute because I want to get over to this Trump thing. But I felt the need to talk with you today because I feel sometimes we lose sight, that we feel like, you know what, our back's against the wall. There's a lot of people who are coming at us. We got these Democratic Socialists now who are making waves, and man, we got them on our heels, and we start to question what we actually believe. And what I am telling you is there's no need for questioning. You don't need to question whether or not you're right. You are. History has proven it time and time again. Be bold. Be proud. Be unafraid to discuss what you believe with others. And if you have trouble doing that, send them here. What's what listening every day brings you is wonderful knowledge that you can then apply to convert others, to help others understand the error of their ways. But guys, let me tell you about our first sponsor today. Got a great one for you. I'm actually wearing one of their products today. Movement watches. Guys, you've heard me talk about Movement. You know those two college dropouts who started their own watch company, the company that grew like crazy, sold over 2 million watches in 160 plus countries. They've revolutionized fashion and style, and they've made it affordable for everybody. And if you haven't checked their site lately, they've doubled the number of watch styles, and they're still expanding. Movement has come from a couple of crowdfunding kids working out of their living room into one of the premier watch companies. I absolutely love these. And here's the reason why. I have those watches that, every time you get a text alert, your wrist buzzes and it tells you how many steps you're doing, all kinds of other garbage like that. And what I really want on my wrist is something that just tells me the time. I have learned that I don't want the constant distraction that comes with having some sort of watch on my arm that's constantly distracting me from the work that needs to be done. And that's what most of the watches today are designed to do, is distract you, keep you from focusing on the important things. Movement is not like that. Simplistic, minimalist design that anybody can afford. If you want to look great, go to Get Movement watches. They start at just $95. At a department store, you pay $400 to $500. They figured out that by selling online that they were able to cut out the middleman and the retail markup. And right now you can get 15% off with free shipping and returns by going to movement.com/Stapleton. And see why Movement keeps growing. Check out their expanding line and collections. Go to Movement. That's MVMT.com/Stapleton and join the movement. I love this watch company. I own 3 of their watches and a couple pairs of their sunglasses too. So if you're interested in some sunglasses, they got some nice ones out there. Okay. Omarosa attacking El Presidente over some of the things that he allegedly said to her. And about her issues inside of the White House. Now, she is calling him a racist. She is calling him all kinds of things. She was caught in a lie. I don't know if it's a lie or not. She first claimed that she had heard that there was a tape about him using the N-word, and then she claimed that she had actually heard the tape. And so she's a squirrely woman. She is. You have to understand, before I talk about any of this, is that Omarosa is absolutely capitalizing on an opportunity here. She's doing a phenomenal job of it, by the way, because she is a completely untrustworthy character. Absolutely, completely untrustworthy. But because so many people hate the president, they're going to give her her due, and they're going to give her the benefit of the doubt. And they're going to believe her anyway just because they hate the president so much. So she was fired from the White House. She's been with the president since long before he was the president. And now she's going to make some decisions about how she's going to make money moving forward, because her entire career has largely been built off the back of the president's celebrity and The Apprentice show that she started out on. And so what is she going to do now? What is her one asset? Well, her one asset is information. She knows what happened and what was going on in the White House, and so she writes this book, Unhinged. And she keeps really quiet from the day she gets fired while she's writing this book out. She gets herself a nice 7-figure payday. They pay her in advance for the book, and now she's going to release it. So what she has to do is she's got to make a stir. So she starts talking a little bit about having some tapes, having recorded some secret conversations. She starts talking about the president allegedly having a tape out there about him using the N-word, and she carefully crafts that into the narrative that she's talking about with her tapes. Now, she doesn't say directly that she has tapes of him saying the N-word. No. She just says she has secret tapes, and she's also heard about a secret tape of him using the N-word. She talks about him having mental problems, not remembering things, possibly going a little bit crazy because she knew him way back when on The Apprentice, and she knows him now, and she builds up all of these questions to everybody, and the book is coming out, and it slowly starts to filter until right up to the day. Tomorrow is the book's release, and she drops this bomb of 2 recorded conversations, one with General Kelly of her being fired, and the other one of Trump's response, or Trump's phone call, when he allegedly found out that she had been fired. So what I want to do is I want to play for you first the Kelly conversation. This is the full, what I could find. I can't find anything more complete than this. But as far as I know, this is the full communication. Now, what I don't know, well, let me play the first part for you, and then we'll come back to it. I'll give you my comments. This is about 3 minutes long, so give it a listen.
Hi there, how are you? Hi. My assistant.
Could you leave this alone?
Sure.
Yeah.
Hi.
I'm only going to stay for a couple of minutes. These are lawyers. We're going to talk to you about leaving the White House. It's come to my attention over the last few months that there's been some pretty, in my opinion, significant integrity issues related to you and use of government vehicles and some other issues, and they'll walk you through the legal aspects of this. But there is some from my view, there's some money issues and other things, but from my view, the integrity issues are very serious. I'm stuck with my past experience, and that is when we hold people accountable in the military. I compare what I see here at the White House and other issues that I've had to deal with, and say, what would I do to this in this case if I was in the Pentagon dealing with a Marine or a soldier or something like that. And in the issue that you may or may not have a full appreciation for, but I think you do, this would be a pretty high level of accountability, meaning a court-martial. We're not suggesting any legal action here. Just stay with me. Just stay with me. Yeah. That it would be a pretty serious offense. So with that, I'm just going to ask you, these gentlemen will explain it, and we'll bring a personnel person in after they talk to you. But just to understand that I'd like to see this be a friendly departure. There are pretty significant legal issues that we hope don't develop into something that will make it ugly for you. But I think it's important to understand that if we make this a friendly departure, we can all be, you can look at your time here in the White House as a year of service to the nation, and then you can go on without any type of difficulty in the future relative to your reputation. But it's very, very important, I think, that you understand that there are some serious legal issues that have been violated, and you're open to some legal action that we hope, I think we can control, right? So with that, if you would stay here with these gentlemen, they'll lay this thing out. And
Can I ask you a couple of questions? Is the president aware of what's going on?
Let's not go down the road. This is a non-negotiable discussion.
I don't want to negotiate. I've never had a chance to talk to you, General Kelly.
Yeah,
so if this is my departure, I'd like to have at least an opportunity to understand.
We can talk another time. This has to do with some pretty serious integrity violations. So I'll let it go at that. So the staff and everyone on the staff works for me, not the president. And so after your departure, I'll inform him if he gets interested on where you may be. So with that, I'll let you go. And gentlemen, if you could take it. Thanks. Yep.
Now, okay, so that's this. There are so many things that are wrong with that conversation. I don't even know where to begin. Now, look, I guess we start with Kelly. So Kelly comes in. Now keep in mind, if you think that you're bringing someone in to fire them because of very serious legal issues, what he calls integrity violations, and the one point he makes is something, the use of government vehicles. I don't know what he was doing, if she was running an underground meth lab in government vehicles, or maybe she was transporting hookers for the president's entourage. I don't know what she potentially was doing with these vehicles, but apparently it was very serious legal issues and integrity violations that needed to be addressed. Now, why, if you are General Kelly, would you keep in mind, this is super shady. This, by the way, is not the way generals act. They don't come in and say, I'm only going to stay for a minute, and these are some lawyers, and they're going to talk to you, but I just wanted to tell you that there's some very serious legal integrity violations here, and he just keeps saying it over and over again. But he never, ever explains what they are. He just waits for the attorneys to take over when he walks out of the room. And to me, that makes absolutely no sense. If you were going to fire somebody and you had a legitimate cause, you would sit down and say, hey, listen, I want you to understand exactly what you did here. And you did this and this and this and this, and we know about it, and you're fired. And oh, by the way, there's enough here that we could, we could seek legal action against you. You violated the law. But we're going to choose not to do that if you will simply leave and that not tarnish further the president's reputation, right? Because he's having a hard enough time. He doesn't need Omarosa making it worse. But that's the way you have that conversation with people, is you come in and you say, look, I got you by the cojones. I got you by the stones, and you're screwed. So here are your choices. You can either make a big fuss and to-do, and then we'll let everybody know what you did, and you can face the legal consequences for what you did, or you can quietly go out the back, say that you got something else going on and you had to leave for personal reasons or whatever, and we'll just let you go. That's the way that conversation goes, if that's what they wanted to do. This was an attempt, from what I can tell, this was an attempt to create some dirt on Omarosa because they didn't want her there, and then to threaten her to say, well, there are serious legal issues here, serious integrity violations, and, if you were in the military, this would be court-martialable offense. But you know what the funnier question is? You know what really bothered me about that conversation? Omarosa never asked for clarity. She never said, what? All right, I'm confused. What exactly have I done wrong? She didn't say, if she was clean, if she hadn't done anything wrong, she would have said, well, I want to know what I did. No, I'm not just going to walk out. You can't just threaten me and tell me that you've got serious legal issues here and integrity violations and not tell me what they are. I mean, how would you react if someone just walked in and told you that, made some sort of allegation about these vague legal and integrity issues that you had, and then said you're fired? No, you'd say, no, I want to know. And you know what? Even if you were guilty, you'd still say it. You want to know why? Because you'd want to know what they know. You're like, how much of this stuff are they actually aware of? Like, how bad could this be for me? Wouldn't you? Would you not? Does anybody else find it odd that Omarosa asks no questions except save one? The one question she asked was, is the president aware of what's happening? Now, why on earth? She was recording this conversation. She was recording it. Why on earth would she want to know the answer to that question? Here's the truth of it. Omarosa knew she was going to be fired. She knew the jig was up. Whatever she was involved with, and I imagine it was probably something semi-serious. She was called in, she decided to record it, and what she wanted to know was she knew it would be valuable to her because the president would likely say he didn't know what happened and he didn't know she was going to be fired or whatever, and she wanted it on the record from Kelly that the president knew ahead of time. That's what it was. It was a gotcha question. And Kelly didn't bite. And so then he leaves the room, and what I'm assuming what happened next was the lawyers presented her both allegations of what she did and also conditions under which she would agree to leave the White House. That's what I would imagine. But we don't hear that part of the tape. See, Omarosa didn't give you everything. It also goes to how shady a person she is. Is that she didn't bother to give you all the tape. She doesn't tell you what her legal issues was, what the integrity violations were. And in the conversations I saw this morning, nobody asked the question. Nobody said, well, what did they accuse you of, Omarosa? Like, what were the charges laid against you? No one has asked that question. They have focused instead on a host of other issues that are really irrelevant. See, if I'm a reporter, if I'm a journalist and I'm doing my job, I want to know what happened. I want to know why she didn't ask any more questions. Why didn't you asked nothing? This is completely, nobody would do that. The one question you asked was about the president. Did you know what they knew? What did they know? What legal violations, what integrity issues did you have that General Kelly claimed were court-martialable if you were in the military? This is baffling to me. It makes no sense at all. Then she records another conversation with El Presidente, and this is the conversation between the two of them.
Omarosa, what's going on? I just saw on the news that you're thinking about leaving. What happened?
General Kelly came to me and said that you guys wanted me to leave.
No, nobody even told me about it. Nobody.
Wow.
They run a big operation, but I didn't know it. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
God damn it. I don't love you leaving at all.
So the president there is making that, I didn't realize what had happened. my gosh, I don't really know what's going on around here. And I heard on the news. I just woke up and I was watching TV and I saw that you were thinking about leaving. Oh, it turns out you've already been fired? Oh, my gosh, I don't like that at all. No one told me. Of course he knew. Of course he knew. But who cares whether he knew or not? I'm baffled by this. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. So now the president is out, and he's firing back, and he's in his preferred method of communication, where he doesn't have to answer any questions and can just punch and doesn't have to take any counter punches. He says wacky Omarosa, who got fired 3 times on The Apprentice, now got fired for the last time. She never made it, never will. She begged me for a job, tears in her eyes. I said okay. People in the White House hated her. She was vicious but not smart. I would rarely see her, but heard really bad things. Nasty to people and would constantly miss meetings and work. When General Kelly came on board, he told me she was a loser and nothing but problems. I told him to try and work it out, if possible, because she only said great things about me until she got fired. So apparently the president's management style is, it doesn't matter how good you are. You can be terrible at your job. You can miss work. You can not show up. You can be terrible to people. You can be unintelligent. You can be any host of things. As long as you say nice things about me publicly, I'll work with you. But then once you start saying nasty things about me, the gloves are off. This is the president's modus operandi. This is how he works. If you want to know how the president works, if you are nice to him, he will be glowing about how wonderful a person you are, how smart you are, how incredible you are. And then the second that you say anything negative about him, he will come at you like a rabid dog. He's like the third monkey on the ramp to Noah's Ark. He's coming at you, fist on fire. And that's the type of guy he is. And it's so underhanded. It's so insincere. Nothing the man says, nothing that comes out of his mouth can be trusted. You never know what he really thinks or really feels about anyone. And I think that he probably did think Omarosa was wonderful as long as she was saying wonderful things about him. I think that's legitimately the way his mind works. He's so narcissistic, so conceited, that he doesn't really care. He really genuinely thinks that you're a great person until you start talking bad about him, and then there couldn't be any worse person on earth. That's the way the man thinks. That's the way he works. It's whatever. My whole point is I just wanted you guys to understand how absolutely weird and really crazy that conversation was between Kelly and Omarosa. Something else is going on there. That is not a normal firing conversation from either side. That's not the way it works. And we're missing the second half of the tape, which she recorded, where she was talking with the attorneys. Maybe that tape's coming later. Maybe that's an explosive next tape that's going to be released that will help further her book sales. But as of right now, that's all we get, and nobody apparently is asking for more. Nobody's like, where's the rest of the tape, Omarosa? I mean, look, if you're being completely above board, why don't you release all of it? What is it that you don't want people to know? You're claiming to be a victim here. You're assaulting the president and verbally assaulting the president and calling him a racist. Why don't you just release all the tapes? No, because this is a game. This is a game, and everybody knows it's being played, and you, the American people, are the pawns. You guys are the guppies. You guys are the grunts. You are the ones to be manipulated. You are the ones to be twisted. You are the ones to be shuffled off to the bookstore to buy Omarosa's book. This is the way it works. A big part of what I do and my success at what I do is being able to step back away from the conversation that's happening and look at it objectively from the outside. So when I listened to the tape today, I listened to it just like any normal person would without a preconceived agenda. I didn't know whether she'd been fired because she'd legitimately done something wrong. I didn't know if she was telling the truth or not. I listened to it just to hear what it had to say. And to me, the most telling thing about it was not that she was fired, was not that whether or not the president knew about it, which is what the media is focusing on. That has nothing to do with it. What bothers me is, why don't we know what she did? Who has a firing conversation like that? It was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. But anyway, it is what it is. All right. Second, guys, let me tell you about Ring. Guys, our sponsor, Ring, first made a splash when they were on Shark Tank a few years ago, and the concept is genius. If someone rings your doorbell and you aren't home, or you just don't want to answer the front door, you can respond to the person by using your smartphone, adding a level of both security and convenience for you, always a good thing. And today, over 1 million people are using Ring video doorbells to help protect their homes. 1 million. Can you believe that? 1 million people have Ring doorbells. And now, Ring has a great new product called Ring Floodlight Cam. Just like Ring's amazing doorbell, Floodlight Cam is a motion-activated camera and floodlight with HD video and two-way audio that lets you know the moment anyone steps onto your property. Guys, this is great for the backyard. I got a buddy of mine who's got one of these. He's put it up in the backyard. Anytime anybody walks anywhere in the perimeter of his backyard, the lights come on, and immediately he's notified on his cell phone that somebody's back there. So if you got especially if you have a larger house, where it's hard for you to hear what's going on in certain sections or areas. If you've got a big yard, maybe you live out in the country or something, and you're really kind of concerned that the people could have access and could be moving around and you wouldn't know about it. These are absolutely the best thing for you, and I've seen them work. They're amazing. Now, as a listener of my show, you can save up to $150 off of a Ring security kit when you go to ring.com/Stapleton, up to $150 off at ring.com/Stapleton. That's ring.com/Stapleton. I absolutely love this product, guys. It's in terms of a security system, it's one of the cheapest ones you will ever buy. And it will work no matter where you are. Your cell phone gets notified. You can talk to people who are in front of your house or in your yard. You can see video, and it records video of what happened. It's perfect. It's not just, most video is only for, this is just a side note, has nothing to do with the ad. Most video that goes up, this is something only security people really understand. When you put up a security camera, you're talking about recovery, not prevention. Now, you stick a sign in the yard that says we're protected by an ADT security system. That's the preventative piece of the security system. Everything else is typically recovery. So, did I get video of the guy? Did he come in? What does he look like? Do we know who this guy is? That's what it is. That's all video does. Unless you have a guy sitting there 24 hours a day monitoring the video and then working on prevention. But if all you've done is set up video cameras, you're working on trying to recover your lost stuff, because it's not going to prevent your stuff from being stolen. What Ring does, and the cool thing about it, is it becomes not only a preventative measure, but also a recovery measure. So because you get notified the second something happens, you get a chance to prevent the negative outcome from happening. And then in the event that you can't get there or whatever, something happens, you at least have some video for trying to get some recovery of your lost or stolen goods. But hopefully that doesn't happen because of the way Ring's built their business. I like it a lot. So go check them out, ring.com/Stapleton. All right. So let's talk about Democratic Socialists. Now, you guys remember this guy. It prompted, you have to go back a few episodes, but I really started talking about what was wrong with Democratic Socialism. And I used this guy, Kanala Ing. Kanala Ing, who was a 29-year-old guy in Honolulu who was running for Senate, and he was a Democratic Socialist, and he's talking about all these big plans. And I just unloaded on these guys, and I pulled up the numbers, and I started calculating what it would cost to do just a fraction of what these trolls wanted to do. And the numbers are so outrageous that it's never going to happen. Not a chance that it ever happens. We would bankrupt this nation overnight. And yet they still continue to push it as though, if we just continue to say it's so for long enough, eventually it'll happen. And I know a lot of you guys have been worried because you've been seeing a lot. You got, Ocasio-Cortez, this woman who won in New York as a Democratic Socialist. And now her and Bernie have been backing some of these other Democratic Socialists around the country. And I know some of you have gotten very nervous and worrying about what was going to happen to this country if the Democratic Socialists took over. You see all the young people in colleges holding their signs and starting Democratic Socialist groups and all this other garbage. And one of the things that is happening and we're starting to realize is that the country is not nearly as eager to embrace the Ocasio-Cortezes of the world as you might think. It turns out a fiscally conservative Democrat soundly defeated 5 other high-profile opponents to represent Honolulu in Congress on Saturday. Now, that is a big win, because if you want to talk about one of the most liberal progressive states in America, that's Honolulu. Hawaii, extremely left-wing. Okay, you're talking about Hawaii, California, New York. Those are the big ones. And this was a huge win for, I guess, fiscal conservatism. So when we talk about fiscal conservative, that's somebody who cares about making sure that money is well spent. Normally, it means if you're a Republican or a Libertarian, it means reducing the amount of money that goes to the government. If you're a Democrat, it just means being very, very careful about how that money is spent, and not being a waster of money. So either way, the most conservative person in the Democrats who ran in Honolulu was the one who won. The results of a deeply liberal state were yet another blow to Ocasio-Cortez and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who have increasingly tried to take their message mainstream ahead of the November midterm elections. Now, how did the young Democratic Socialist fare? He had plenty of news coverage. Everybody was talking about him. He had the Ocasio-Cortezes of the world backing him. He had all of the advantages that one could have going into an election. It turns out the person who won, Case, received 47,000 votes, or 40% of the total. How much did Mr. Ng, our Democratic Socialist friend, take in? 6.3%. He was rejected handily. His ideas rejected handily. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not losing this fight. All right, some would argue that we're not winning it either, and that the Libertarian Party could certainly do more to help advance it. But they are. The truth is, we are going to be on the ballot in all 50 states. There are some good things that are going to be happening here over the next couple of years as we move into 2020. And Mr. Ng only could muster 6.3% of the vote in one of the most liberal states in America. This is good news for us. It tells us that people are not idiots, that they're looking at this and they understand their own pocketbooks, they understand their own wallets, and they're tired of being taxed into submission. They're tired of being taxed into poverty. In fact, in the article here, it says Hawaii's high taxes and surging homelessness put a dent on enthusiasm for establishment Democrats in the deep blue state, leading some analysts to predict that Ng would have performed better. But his loss, like the primary defeats last week of populist Michigan gubernatorial hopeful Abdul El-Sayed and congressional candidate Said, as well as Congressman House candidate and former Sanders staffer Brent Welder, left Ocasio-Cortez's followers empty-handed. Nobody wants democratic socialism because nobody wants socialism. The truth is, when you start having conversations with people, you will be amazed at how closely your ideas align. Now, you might find that you have very broad differences, or there will be wide expanses, chasms in some cases, of how you think things ought to function in the world. But the truth is, most people will agree that we shouldn't hurt people and we shouldn't take their stuff. And if you can get them, as I said, to agree with that, then you have already taken the upper hand in whatever conversation you're going to have. Because there is a natural need. This is something people don't really understand, but it's in influencing others. One of the things that people look for in terms of influence is consistency. Consistency of message, consistency of who you are. They want somebody who is the same day in and day out, who they know who they are. That consistency leads to a comfort level. It leads to likability and trust. These are all things that you need for influence. It's one of the reasons that Donald Trump is hated by so many, is he's terribly inconsistent. But on the things that are important to his constituents, he's unwavering. The wall, immigration, jobs in America. See, those things are the things he got elected on, and those are the things that he is unwavering on. So, when you look at this in terms of consistency, one of the things that you can do is when you get someone to admit that they believe that you shouldn't hurt people and shouldn't take their stuff, now when you start talking about taxes, it forces them to be inconsistent, which is terribly painful for people to do. You can keep coming back to, well, when we talked, you said shouldn't hurt people, shouldn't take their stuff. I mean, if I take something without permission, that's stealing, is it not? So when the government takes your money, your tax dollars, without your permission, how's that not stealing? Now they have to justify it, and it doesn't make sense. There's no possible way that rationally you can make that work. You can say, well, I think in this case it should be okay, but now you've created an inconsistency. So there are all kinds of problems that are created in arguments that the left and people who are more progressive than say you or I would be, that they encounter when they first agree that you shouldn't hurt people and you shouldn't take their stuff. It's one of the best ways to start that conversation. But the truth is, folks, this country is not lost. For anybody who is just sitting around, and this is what I really hate about, well, I'll just say it, to some of the people who listen to this show. Some of the people who listen to this show are just waiting for the country to burn down. I mean, they just want to come in, and all they want me to do is they just want to hear me bash the government, bash people in it, bash the economy, talk about how terrible it is, talk about how stupid other people are, and talk about how ugly and terrible the world is because of all these stupid people. That's really what they want. They're angry, they're bitter, they're defeated, and what they want is somebody to acknowledge and to be a spokesperson for their point of view. And so that's why those same people, whenever I start talking about success and I start talking about wealth and abundance and being able to, move beyond what's happening in the world around them and actually succeed in spite of all the stuff that's happening, that's when they come out and they start bashing. They're like, I can't believe he's talking about this again. He's just trying to sell stuff to me. Why can't he just talk about how terrible American government is? That's what we want to hear. We want to hear about how it's all burning down, how the next collapse is just around the corner. We want to hear about how it's all going to implode, and finally we're going to get the utopia we've been looking for. We don't want an optimistic outlook. We don't want to hear good things. We don't want to know how to fix it. And they don't. And if that's the most frustrating thing about doing this show, if I can be completely honest, most frustrating thing about doing this show is I want to focus on the positive. I want to focus on the things that you can do today to change your life. We got the 5 principles here. They're a life philosophy, people. They're not a political ideology. They're a life philosophy about creating wealth and opportunity and abundance in your life. It's crazy to me that people don't make the connection. I'm taking articles, I'm taking information that's happening in the world around you, and I'm showing you how those basic 5 principles, that life philosophy, will change your life. It really will. And still, every time I start talking about it, there are people who come to me and say, I wish you would stop talking about that. Well, I wish you'd get off this whole entrepreneurial, success trip. I'm not looking for motivation. Well, go somewhere else then. I need it. Haven't you? I don't do this show for you guys. I don't. I love that you're here and you're listening. I do this show for me. I need the motivation. I need to be lifted up. Sometimes I got to come in here and I got to pump myself up because I'm reading all this garbage and I'm thinking, man, this is going to fall apart. I really feel like the world's coming in around me. And I'm like, no, I can't live like that. I don't want to live like that. I don't want to believe that. I want to believe that a guy can still be successful. I reject your reality and replace it with my own. I got to be that for you if you can't be that for yourself. I got to be that for me. Guys, there is more wealth, more opportunity, more happiness out there than you can possibly imagine, and you just got to be willing to accept it. So if you're one of those people, I'm challenging you. Not those of you who like hearing that piece. I'm challenging those of you who are constantly complaining about the motivational speeches that I do. And it happens from time. It doesn't happen all the time. It happens sometimes. Who just don't like that. I just can't stand to listen to that. Understand, I don't know where you're at in your life, but I guarantee you're not meeting your potential. Because guys who are really pushing the envelope, guys who are really stretching themselves, guys who are, and ladies too, guys who are really risking and who are really putting themselves on the line to see where their limits are, they need it. They need it because it's a constant struggle. It's a constant question as to whether or not I'm doing the right thing, whether I'm making the right moves. You got the walls coming up, everything. There's pressure all the time. You need somebody there to tell you, keep going, keep your head down, keep grinding, stay dangerous. You need that. And if you're in a position where you don't, it's because you're trapped in a level of mediocrity that I don't understand. I don't want to be where you are. I don't want to live in your world. And that's just the God's honest truth. So when we talk about this stuff, I want you to understand that those 5 principles can change your life. If you adhere to them, accept responsibility for your actions, and position yourself, no matter where you are, whether you want to start your own business, whether you want to work for somebody else, put yourself in a position to thrive. I answered an email today from a young man who said he got a lot of motivation from me, and when he was laid off from his job at 20 years old, he was listening to the show, and it was what motivated him to go out, and he's working for a small company now, and there's a lot of room for growth as the company is growing, and he's sending me a note, and he's asking me, what can I do to make myself an invaluable asset? Because I not only want to be in a position where I'm taking on more responsibility, but I also want more authority. Now that's powerful. That's a guy who's thinking not, because see, responsibility without authority just means that you're the guy you're in the drudgery of it. You're the guy who the stuff falls on every time something breaks or every time something doesn't work, but you've got actually no authority to change anything or make any corrections. You just got to kind of take it. You don't want to be in a position where you have responsibility but not authority. The preferably is to be authority with no responsibility. That's where you want to be. It's really hard to get into that position, but if you can get there, hey, good for you. But in reality, what you want, if you believe the way we believe, what you want is you want authority and responsibility. You want the authority to do what you think needs to be done, and you're willing to accept responsibility for the way it turns out. And I love that kind of passion. It's rare that I respond to emails when people send them to me because there's just too many, but I do read them. And when I read his, I said, I got to respond to this. So I responded, and I gave him a couple of tips on how to gain not only responsibility inside this company, but more importantly, authority, and what it takes inside an organization to do that. And I hope he finds it valuable, and I hope he's able to use it. But more importantly, beyond that, is he was thinking that way. And I'm so glad, because I'm glad I had some sort of effect on the way he thinks about his career and where he's going. Now, he's not starting a small business. He's not going out on his own. He's working for a young company, and he's gaining knowledge and skill. He's increasing his own human capital, and he wants to make sure he is an invaluable asset to that organization. Good for him. That's the way it should be. So no matter where you are, figure out how you can be that way. Be better. Wherever you're at right now, figure out a way to be better and find where that limit is. Find out how far you can go. And I promise you, when you look back on it in a few years, you're going to be like, God, I never thought I'd be here. I never thought I had this in me. I never thought I was capable of this. Because we sell ourselves short every single day. So don't take any of this bad news to heart. We have good things happening. The Democratic Socialists are not taking over the country, and before long, we can dominate. Just keep those principles rolling, and we'll be back here tomorrow to do this all over again. Be safe. Be good. I'll talk to you then.
In an emergency, radio can be your lifeline. When the power is out and cellular networks are down, Next Radio is the free FM radio app that still works on your Android smartphone. Download Next Radio now at the Google Play Store. Stay tuned to this station and stay safe.
Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise.
And all was Benjamin Franklin wise. So you actually think electricity can pass through metal? Ha! Ben Franklin, go fly a kite.
Excellent idea. Where are my keys?
Besides the bifocals, Ben invented the Franklin stove,
you go!
the odometer, whoa, oh, and the lightning rod. Ingenuity
Hey, pass it on! From the Foundation for a Better Life at values.com.
Do you or a loved one have a chronic condition such as diabetes, a heart condition, or asthma? Do you or a loved one have a severe allergy to a certain food, drug, or insect? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you are a candidate for an electronic medical alert watch, the alternative to the traditional medical ID bracelet. An electronic medical alert watch visibly communicates a person's health conditions, drug, food, and other allergies, and other critical information to help make a diagnosis and save a life. Take control of your health. Protect yourself or your loved ones and order an electronic medical alert watch today. Visit www.epill.com. That's epill.com. Affordable, free shipping, and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Remember, www.epill.com. That's EPILL.com. ePill.
Do you need
In an emergency, radio can be your lifeline. When the power is out and cellular networks are down, Next Radio is the free FM radio app that still works on your Android smartphone. Download Next Radio now at the Google Play Store. Stay tuned to this station and stay safe.
855-402-7556. Offer is not available in Minnesota, Montana, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Washington.
This is Betty White. I know you don't need one more thing to worry about, but listen, high blood pressure can cause kidney damage, blindness, heart attack, stroke, and you can have high blood pressure even if you feel all right. 1 in 7 adults has it, but it's easy to get your blood pressure checked, and you can treat it if it is too high. So don't worry about it, don't ignore it, just see your doctor and check it out.
For your free booklet, visit the Will Rogers Institute at wrinstitute.org and find us on Facebook and Twitter.